Abandoned black girl survives snowstorm. Billionaire's life-changing rescue. Snow slammed against the windshield as Klauser drove down Gresham Avenue, fighting to see through the white blur. It was past midnight, and the February storm had turned Detroit into a wall of wind and ice. He was about to pull over when his headlights caught something on the sidewalk, a small shape half buried in snow. He slowed down, thinking it was trash blown by the wind, until the shape moved. Klauser's heart jumped. He stopped the car, rushed into the freezing air, and saw her, a little girl, maybe 4 years old, her dark caramel skin pale from the cold. She wore a thin pink dress soaked through, no coat, no shoes, her small body shaking so hard she could barely breathe. Klauser knelt beside her. "Hey, sweetheart, can you hear me?" he said, wrapping his coat around her. The child's cracked lips trembled. "I'm sorry," she whispered weakly. "I'll be quiet. I'll be good. Please don't leave me here." Those words froze him more than the storm itself. Who could leave a child out here to die? Would you have stopped that night? Tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. Tomorrow's story will move you even more. The emergency room at Henry Ford Hospital was chaos. Nurses shouted vitals, monitors beeped, and cold air rushed through as another stretcher came in from the snow. In the middle of it all, Klauser stood frozen in his soaked tuxedo, his hair dripping, his hands red from the cold. He didn't move from the side of the little girl he'd found in the snow. "Core temperature, 84. A nurse called out. Doctors worked quickly, wrapping Romaine's small body in thermal blankets, fitting an oxygen mask over her nose and mouth. Her skin was pale, her lips cracked and blue. They placed warm fluids, rubbed her hands, whispered to each other in clipped voices. Klauser's chest tightened with every word he didn't understand. He wanted to help, to do something, anything, but all he could do was watch. A doctor finally turned to him. "She's stable for now, but she's hypothermic and dehydrated. Severe malnutrition. You did the right thing bringing her in when you did." 10 more minutes, and he didn't finish the sentence. Klauser looked through the glass at the child's still form. "Will she make it?" he asked quietly. "She's strong," the doctor said. "We'll do everything we can." As the medical team moved away, a woman in a gray coat entered the ER, flashing her ID at the desk. She was tall, with sharp eyes softened by exhaustion. "Patricia Voss, Child Protective Services," she said. "I was told there's a foster child brought in from exposure." The nurse pointed toward Romaine's room. Patricia walked over, noting the man standing outside. "You're the one who found her?" "Yes." "Klauser, he said, offering a shaky hand. Patricia nodded. "Mr. Mintz, I need to ask you some questions about where and how you found her." He explained quickly, the storm, the bundle in the snow, the words Romaine had whispered. Patricia listened without interrupting, her face tightening slightly. "Do you know her foster family?" "No. But someone left her out there to die," Klauser said. Patricia made a note on her tablet, her tone calm but focused. "We'll verify her placement. I'll need to contact the foster mother on file." It didn't take long. Within hours, a woman swept into the waiting area, tall, polished, her hair perfectly styled despite the weather. Her coat was designer, her gloves soft leather, her tears precise and well-timed. "Oh, thank goodness!" she cried, walking straight toward Patricia. "I've been looking everywhere for her. I didn't sleep all night. I can't believe she wandered out." Klauser turned, disbelief written all over his face. "You're her foster mother?" "Yes. Diane Keller." She dabbed her eyes with a tissue. "Romaine must have slipped out while I was asleep. She does this sometimes when she's upset. She's imaginative." Klauser's jaw tightened. Upset? That child was barefoot in the snow, in the middle of a blizzard. Diane gave a soft, nervous laugh. "She's been through a lot. Sometimes she acts out. I love her dearly, but she's not an easy child. Patricia studied Diane quietly. Ms. Keller, do you have any idea what time she went missing? I know, I was asleep. I woke up and she was gone. Clouser crossed his arms. So she walked out of your house in a summer dress, barefoot, in below-zero weather, and you didn't notice until after midnight? Diane's eyes flickered, just for a second, before she smiled again. I understand how this looks, Mr. Mintz. But Romaine has behavioral issues. The system knows. I've done everything I can for her. Patricia's eyes moved from Diane to Clouser. Mr. Mintz, I need you to wait here while we speak privately. But Clouser didn't move. She's terrified of that woman. When she saw her name mentioned, she started shaking. You can't send that child back. Diane's expression shifted almost instantly, from tears to something calculating. She glanced at Clouser's clothes, his expensive watch, the way hospital staff deferred to him. You're Clouser Mintz, the developer, right? I've read about you. Your company donated to the pediatric wing here. Clouser said nothing. Diane smiled faintly. You're a kind man. Maybe a little too kind. Romaine knows how to get attention. She's been in 3 homes before mine. Each one said the same thing, she lies. She makes up stories when she's scared. Patricia's brow furrowed. Ms. Keller, this child is in critical condition. This isn't about stories. Oh, I'm sure, Diane said softly. But children like her sometimes hurt themselves to make others feel sorry for them. You have to be careful. That sentence made Clouser's blood boil. Children like her, he repeated. Diane didn't answer. Patricia stepped in. Enough. Romaine will remain here for observation until we determine the next step. Diane's mask cracked for just a heartbeat, her jaw tightened, her eyes flashed, but she quickly regained her composure. Of course, she said smoothly. I only want what's best for her. When Patricia walked away to check on Romaine, Clouser leaned closer to Diane. His voice was quiet, but his anger was clear. I saw her body covered in bruises. You left her there, didn't you? Diane stiffened. You have no idea what you're talking about. Keep your accusations to yourself. We'll see about that, Clouser said. By morning, Patricia had filed an official report, marking Romaine's case for review. Before leaving the hospital, Clouser signed a sworn statement describing how he found her. As the first light broke over Detroit, Clouser stood by Romaine's bed one last time. Her breathing had steadied, her small hand resting in his. He whispered, "You're safe now." Outside the room, Patricia met him with a folder. I'll be honest, Mr. Mintz. The system moves slow. It might take days before we get authorization to remove her from that foster placement. Clouser looked down the hall where Diane had disappeared moments earlier. Then I'll move faster. I'm filing for emergency protective custody. Patricia raised her brows. You're serious? I don't start things I don't finish, he said quietly. She's not going back there. Patricia studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, Mr. Mintz. Let's see if your promise is as strong as your word. Clouser Mintz didn't sleep the night after Romaine was admitted. The image of her small body shivering in the snow haunted him. He sat in his study overlooking the frozen river, the city lights glowing faintly through the storm, his laptop open. He wasn't waiting for the system anymore. He was moving. By morning, his phone buzzed with calls. 2 of his most trusted people were already working, Robert Lane, a private investigator he'd used during corporate disputes, and Jenna Croft, a forensic accountant. Both were discreet, both effective. I want everything on this woman, Clouser said. Her background, her income, every address she's ever had, every check she's ever cashed. Her name is Diane Keller, at least that's what she calls herself. Robert hesitated. You think that's not her real name? I don't think, Clouser said, staring out at the snow. I know. Within 48 hours, the first report arrived. Diane Keller didn't exist before 2019. No birth records, no social security trail, no tax filings. But there was someone else, Diane Kovac, same face, different name, with foster records scattered across 3 states. Jenna's findings confirmed it. She's been moving every 2 or 3 years. Changes her name, starts over with new foster applications. Her background checks show clean, because she uses fake references. It's a pattern. Robert added, and every placement matches a type: children marked as difficult, mostly kids of color or those with medical needs. Easier to overlook, less family involvement, less chance of inspection. Clouser clenched his fists. She's been using the system like an income stream. The records painted a horrifying picture. 6 years earlier in Ohio, 2 foster children under her care, ages 5 and 7, had been found malnourished. The case file described them as underweight due to dietary issues. Diane, under her old name, had told social workers the kids were picky eaters. The case was closed after a warning. In Indiana, the trail darkened further. A 3-year-old boy named Cameron had died in winter conditions, found behind an abandoned trailer. Diane's name appeared again, buried in court transcripts as a former guardian. Her explanation was identical. Cameron had wandered off during the night. Robert's voice broke over the speaker. She's been doing this for years, Clouser. Moving just before each case catches up to her. Clouser didn't answer right away. He looked down at the file spread across his desk. Photos of smiling children, official stamps, neat signatures. Paperwork made it look normal. But every page told a story of pain no one had stopped to read. The next day, he drove to the neighborhood where Diane had lived with Romaine. The small house on West Philadelphia Street was quiet, the windows covered. He spoke with 2 neighbors, both hesitant at first. "Yeah, I heard crying sometimes," one of them, an older man named Darryl, finally said. "Sounded like a kid locked somewhere. But she always said she was babysitting. I didn't want to get involved." Another neighbor, a woman in her 40s, crossed her arms tightly. "That woman always looked perfect. Nice car, nice clothes. But that little girl. I saw her once through the window, eating cereal from the box. Looked hungry." Jenna's report added more weight to their words. Grocery receipts showed little more than canned soup, crackers, and soda, barely enough to feed an adult, let alone a growing child. Her bank records told the rest. Over $18,000 in foster payments during the year, but less than $900 spent on food, clothes, or medical care for Romaine. The rest went into online shopping and salon visits. Clouser printed every receipt, every document, and laid them out across his table. "This is theft," he said quietly. "But worse than that, it's cruelty." Medical records from a free clinic downtown filled in another piece of the puzzle. Romaine had been treated twice for stomach problems. The doctor's notes showed concern about low weight and bruises. Diane had explained it away as a sensitive stomach. The doctor referred her to a specialist, but the appointment was never scheduled. Robert managed to track down Romaine's previous foster mother, Beverly Johnson, who now lived in Toledo. Clouser called her personally. "I remember Romaine," Beverly said over the phone. Her voice was warm, but sad. She was a sweet child. Quiet, always clutching a little toy rabbit. The agency moved her after I got sick and couldn't care for her. They told me she'd gone to a good home. Clouser's tone softened. "They said she had behavioral issues. Did you ever see any?" Beverly gave a small laugh. "Behavioral issues? No. She just didn't talk much. She'd hoard food sometimes, hide crackers in her pillowcase. That's not behavior. That's fear." The silence that followed felt heavy. Beverly continued. "That girl has been passed around since she was born. Her mother was only 16, in rehab when Romaine came into care. No relatives came forward. The system loses kids like her all the time. When the call ended, Klauser sat quietly. He had entered business deals worth billions without hesitation, but this was different. The deeper he went, the more the truth hurt. At midnight, Patricia Voss called. "I've been going through Diane's files," she said. Half of the reports she submitted about Romaine look copied and pasted from other children's records. The same sentences, the same excuses, shows signs of aggression, displays difficulty bonding, refuses meals. None of it fits the Romaine I've seen at the hospital. Klauser exhaled. "So it's all lies." "More than lies," Patricia replied. "It's manipulation. She knows the system. She knows the wording that keeps investigators away. She's made a living from it." By the end of that week, Klauser's investigation folder had grown thick. He brought it to Patricia's office the next morning. "I'm not stopping," he said. "If the court needs evidence, we'll give them enough to shut her down for good." Patricia looked at him, tired but determined. "You might be saving more than one child." "I hope so," Klauser said. "But right now, I'm saving one." As he left the building, the wind bit through his coat again, but he barely felt it. For the first time in years, Klauser Mints had a purpose that didn't come with profit margins or contracts. This was personal. And somewhere across the city, a woman named Diane Kovac was starting to realize someone wasn't going to look away this time. The snow along Woodward Avenue had turned gray by the time Klauser arrived at the Child Protective Services building. His car idled by the curb, exhaust curling into the cold air as he stepped out, briefcase in hand. Inside, the waiting room smelled of coffee and disinfectant. Social workers hurried past with folders pressed to their chests. To them, it was another day. But to Klauser, it felt like the beginning of a war. Patricia Voss met him in a small glass-walled conference room. She looked exhausted but focused, her desk buried under reports and photos. "We're compiling everything," she said, motioning for him to sit. "The pattern is clear now." She opened a thick binder labeled Kovac, Diane, Active Review. Inside were dozens of pages detailing years of placements. Each child listed had something in common, either a minor disability, a history of trauma, or a racial background that made them statistically less likely to be adopted. Patricia ran her finger down the list. "These are the children who slip through cracks." She knew exactly where to find them. Klauser leaned forward. "She picked them because nobody would fight for them." Patricia nodded. "And because the payments kept coming. If a child is labeled behaviorally challenged, the state increases the stipend." Diane learned to use that language perfectly. She pulled out another folder. "Here's Romaine's case history." The first page showed a newborn photo, Romaine wrapped in a hospital blanket, her tiny fist near her face. Born to a 16-year-old mother who had tested positive for narcotics. The father's line read, "Unknown." "She's been in care since birth," Patricia said softly. 3 previous foster placements. The first ended when her foster mother developed severe asthma and couldn't continue. The second was closed after the agency lost track of paperwork. The third, Diane's, was approved in record time. Klauser scanned the documents. The speed of approval stood out. How did she pass background checks so easily? Patricia sighed. She used fake references, names of real people who never answered phone calls. The system accepted her paperwork because the caseload was too heavy to re-verify. Jenna's investigation had already shown how Diane recycled phrases across reports, but Patricia's office found even more damning proof. She spread out copies of Diane's monthly foster evaluations. Each one painted Romaine as withdrawn, defiant, or resistant to affection. Patricia handed him a second set of papers, notes from Romaine's daycare teacher before she was pulled from the program. The contrast was painful. "Romaine is shy but affectionate," one note read. Loves story time, shares toys, smiles when praised. Clouser shook his head. She twisted everything good into something bad. That's how she kept oversight minimal, Patricia said. By making Romaine sound difficult, she discouraged home visits. Over the following week, witness statements began to roll in. Store clerks from Diane's neighborhood remembered her well. One cashier at a local grocery store recalled her weekly visits. She always bought for herself, the woman said in her statement. Wine, perfume, frozen dinners. Never baby food, never cereal. I used to wonder if the little girl was hers at all. Another witness, a daycare worker from Romaine's first placement, remembered something else. She'd hoard food, the woman said. Hide crackers in her coat, tuck apples into her pockets. We thought it was just a phase. Now I think she was scared she wouldn't get another meal. Meanwhile, Robert Lane compiled a forensic timeline of the night Romaine was found. Security cameras, weather alerts, and traffic reports all confirmed the truth. Detroit had been under 2 consecutive storm warnings. Temperatures had dropped below zero. Diane's claim that Romaine wandered out became impossible to defend. Even if the door had been left open, Robert explained, there's no way a 4-year-old could walk a mile barefoot through snowdrifts. She didn't wander. She was left. Clouser pressed his palms to the table. That's the evidence we needed. The following days were filled with evaluations, psychological testing, home inspections, interviews. Every part of Clouser's life was examined, from his finances to his medical history. Some might have been insulted by the intrusion, but Clouser welcomed it. During his home visit, Romaine's hospital nurse, now assigned as a child advocate, observed how he interacted with her. She noted that he read to her every night, even when she was asleep. He kept a stuffed rabbit on her pillow and visited the hospital daily. Patricia later called to review the results. Your evaluations came back exceptional, she said. You understand this process won't be short, right? Clouser smiled faintly. I have time. She deserves someone who won't give up when it gets hard. There was a pause on the line. You're serious about this? I want to be her father, he said quietly. Officially. Permanently. Patricia didn't respond right away. She'd seen dozens of cases that started with good intentions and ended in heartbreak. But something in his voice silenced her doubts. Within weeks, the story began attracting media attention. Someone inside the hospital had leaked details, and soon headlines appeared across Detroit. Billionaire fights for abandoned foster child. News vans parked outside the CPS office. Reporters chased Clouser's car down Woodward, shouting questions about motives and charity. Some praised him as a hero, others accused him of playing savior. Clouser ignored them all. He wasn't interested in image. Every visit to Romaine mattered more than every article printed about him. Inside her hospital room, he found her coloring quietly by the window. Her hand trembled as she held the crayon, but she smiled when he entered. You came back, she whispered. Always, he said. Outside, Patricia watched through the glass. For months she'd battled bureaucracy and heartbreak, but that moment reminded her why she stayed in the job. 2 people, one lost, one guilty over being too late, had found a reason to fight. In her next report, she wrote a single line under recommendation for permanency. Clouser Mintz demonstrates capacity for long-term commitment and empathy. Strongly supports transition to adoptive consideration pending court approval. For the first time since Romaine's rescue, the case file closed not with tragedy, but with hope that something good could still grow from the wreckage. And somewhere beyond the courthouse walls, Diane Kovac was preparing her defense. She wasn't finished yet. The marble halls of Wayne County Family Court were quiet that morning. Reporters waited outside the doors on St. Antoine Street, cameras ready, voices hushed. Inside courtroom 6B, every seat was taken. Months of investigation had led to this, the day the world would finally hear what happened to Romain Gunter. Klauser sat beside Patricia Voss at the petitioner's table, his suit pressed, his face drawn from sleepless nights. Across the room sat Diane Kovac. She looked nothing like the woman from the charity gala photos. Gone were the designer clothes and diamonds. She now wore a plain gray dress, her hair pulled back, eyes lowered in perfect sorrow. It was a performance, carefully rehearsed. Her attorney, Mark Fenley, rose first. "My client is not a monster," he said firmly. "She is a foster mother who made a mistake that's being twisted by a powerful man trying to play savior." He pointed toward Klauser. "Mr. Mintz is a billionaire. He's used to getting what he wants. This entire case is about control, not compassion. He has no biological tie to this child, no legal right. Yet he's using his money and influence to steal her away." Whispers rippled through the gallery. Klauser didn't move. His eyes stayed on Romain's empty seat. Fenley continued, accusing the state of discrimination. "My client was targeted because of her faith and modest background. This is persecution disguised as justice." When he sat down, the prosecutor, Rachel Kim, stood. Her voice was calm but sharp enough to cut through the noise. "Let's deal in facts," she said. "Facts, not performances." She called the first witness, Dr. Lenora Green, the pediatric specialist from Henry Ford Hospital. Dr. Green described Romain's condition when she was admitted: internal temperature dangerously low, old bruises in different stages of healing, ribs visible beneath her skin. "She was days away from organ failure," the doctor said. "We've treated frostbite victims before. This child's case was worse because of prolonged malnutrition. She hadn't eaten properly for months." Rachel Kim displayed photographs on the screen, carefully, respectfully. The courtroom went silent. Diane looked away, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Next came Robert Lane, the forensic accountant Klauser had hired. He laid out financial statements from Diane's accounts across multiple states. She received over $18,000 in state foster payments within 9 months, he said. But records show fewer than $900 in expenses for the child's care. The rest went to personal purchases, designer goods, luxury salons, travel. He pointed to another document. She also transferred smaller amounts to an unregistered account under the name DK Support Services. That account matches payments made during previous foster placements in Ohio and Indiana. Diane's lawyer objected. The judge, Carmen Valdez, overruled him. Rachel Kim nodded to the next witness. "We'd like to reopen evidence from the Indiana case of Cameron Hollis." A projection showed a series of crayon drawings, done by Cameron before his death 3 years earlier. One drawing showed a small figure inside a dark room, a barred window above, and a blue scribble that looked like snow. In another, he had drawn food, apples, sandwiches, floating out of reach. The courtroom stayed silent for nearly a full minute. Rachel continued softly. Cameron was 3 years old when he died of hypothermia. His foster mother at the time was the same woman sitting in this courtroom. Her explanation back then was identical to this one. She claimed the child wandered out. The next witnesses were former neighbors. One after another, they described what they'd heard through Diane's walls. Crying late at night. Locks installed on bedroom doors. Groceries carried in without child-sized portions. One neighbor, an elderly man with trembling hands, told the judge, "We thought she was strict, but not cruel. Now I wish I'd called someone sooner." Diane's lawyer tried to discredit each statement, but his arguments grew weaker as the day went on. During a recess, Patricia spoke quietly to Klauser. "The judge has agreed to hear Romain in chambers tomorrow. No cameras, no jury. Just her and Judge Valdez." Klauser nodded. "She's ready. She's stronger now." That night, Romain stayed with Helen Bradford, a retired schoolteacher who lived in Palmer Woods. Helen's home was filled with warmth and music. Romaine clutched her stuffed rabbit as Helen tucked her in. "You don't have to be scared tomorrow," Helen whispered. "Just tell the truth. The truth is enough." The next morning, the courtroom was quieter. The news crews waited outside, unaware that the most important testimony was taking place behind closed doors. Inside the judge's private office, Romaine sat on a small chair, legs swinging nervously. Judge Valdez smiled gently. "You don't have to be afraid of me, sweetheart. Can you tell me about Miss Diane?" Romaine's voice was small but steady. "She didn't like when I talked. She said good girls don't ask for food. I tried to be good." Judge Valdez leaned forward. "Do you remember the night you were outside?" Romaine nodded. "She said I made her tired. She said if I loved her, I'd be quiet forever. Then she closed the door." Valdez wrote nothing for several seconds. "She only said, 'Thank you, Romaine. You were very brave.'" Later that afternoon, court reconvened for closing arguments. Diane's lawyer tried one last time to turn the tide. "We cannot let wealth rewrite the meaning of justice," he declared. "This man is using his resources to shame an honest woman." But the evidence spoke louder than his words. When Judge Valdez finally returned with her decision, the courtroom stood still. "After reviewing all testimony and exhibits," she said clearly, "this court finds that Diane Kovac willfully endangered the welfare of a minor child. Her foster license is revoked permanently, and she is remanded to state custody pending criminal proceedings." She turned to Clouser. "Mr. Mintz, your petition for temporary guardianship is approved. Further evaluation for adoption will proceed immediately." Patricia closed her eyes. Clouser exhaled for the first time in hours. Across the room, Diane sat motionless, the mask of sadness replaced by something harder, real anger she could no longer hide. Romaine was safe now. But for everyone in that courtroom, the case had left a mark that would never fade. Outside, as snow began to fall again over Detroit, Clouser stepped into the cold air and whispered the words that had guided him since the night he found her. No child should ever have to beg to be kept warm. The judge's chambers were quiet except for the soft hum of the heater. A small stuffed rabbit sat on the edge of the table beside a paper cup of cocoa. Romaine's legs swung above the floor, her shoes barely brushing the carpet. Across from her sat Judge Carmen Valdez, calm and kind-eyed, and beside the judge, a child psychologist named Dr. Porter took quiet notes. Romaine's tiny fingers gripped the rabbit so tightly its ear bent sideways. When the judge spoke, her voice was gentle. "Romaine, you don't have to be scared. I just want to hear your story. Take your time." The little girl nodded, her eyes downcast. "Yes, ma'am." "Do you remember living with Miss Diane?" Romaine hesitated, then gave a small nod. "She said I ate too much. She didn't like when I talked. She said kids who talk too much don't get to stay." Judge Valdez leaned forward slightly, careful not to rush her. What did she mean by that? Romaine's lower lip trembled. "She said nobody wants black girls anyway. Too dark. Too old. Too broken." Her voice broke on the last word. Dr. Porter offered her a tissue, and she took it with both hands. "What did you do when she said those things?" the judge asked softly. "I tried to be quiet," Romaine whispered. "I tried not to make her mad. But she always got mad." The judge's pen stopped moving. "Can you tell me about the night you were outside in the snow?" Romaine pressed the rabbit to her chest. "I spilled my juice. It got on the carpet." She started shouting. "I said sorry, but she said sorry doesn't clean things. She told me to go outside till I learned to be useful." Dr. Porter's pen paused. Romaine continued, her small voice steady despite the tremor in it. "She locked the door. I knocked, but she turned the TV up. I waited, but the wind was cold, and I got sleepy. I thought maybe if I walked, I'd find someone nice. She wiped her eyes. I tried to walk, but my feet hurt. So I sat down by a building. I prayed. I said, "Please God, send someone before I sleep forever." The judge asked quietly, "What happened next?" Romaine's face softened. A man stopped. He had kind eyes. He put his coat on me. He said I was safe. He kept holding my hand in the car so I wouldn't be scared. "Do you remember his name?" She smiled faintly. "Mr. Klauser. But I call him Papa Klauser now." Judge Valdez's tone warmed. "What do you like about him?" "He keeps his promises," she said quickly. "He said nobody would hurt me again, and nobody has. He reads stories every night, and he makes pancakes that taste funny but good." The judge chuckled softly. "Funny but good?" Romaine giggled, the sound brief but bright. "He burns them sometimes. But he says it's okay, because we can try again. He says life's like that." Dr. Porter leaned forward gently. "How do you feel now when you see him?" Romaine tilted her head, thinking. "Safe. Like I can breathe." The judge nodded. "What do you want to happen, Romaine?" "I want to stay with him. Forever," she said simply. "I'd feel happy. I'd feel safe." There was a pause, long enough for the weight of those words to sink in. The judge smiled faintly. "Thank you, Romaine. You were very brave to tell us." When the recording stopped, Romaine hopped down from her chair, holding her rabbit by one ear. Judge Valdez walked her to the door. "You did something very important today," she told her. "You told the truth. That's how we help other children too." Romaine smiled shyly. "Can I tell Papa Klauser now?" "You can," the judge said. "He'll be very proud." Later that day, the recorded testimony was played in the courtroom. The lights dimmed, and Romaine's small voice filled the room. Every person listened in stillness, lawyers, reporters, even guards by the door. On the screen, Romaine's words came clear and unguarded. She said I was too dark and too broken. The gallery grew tense. A few people wiped their eyes. Diane sat motionless, her expression tight. When Romaine's voice spoke of the night in the snow, Klauser gripped the table edge, his knuckles white. Patricia Voss placed a hand on his arm, but he barely noticed. "I prayed someone would come," Romaine said through the speakers. Then he did. "He said I was safe." Klauser's eyes filled. For months, he had fought lawyers, paperwork and headlines, but this, hearing her speak those words, felt like the real battle. In the recording, Romaine ended with a small, hopeful voice. "He keeps his promises." When the playback stopped, silence covered the courtroom. Judge Valdez sat still for several seconds before speaking. "The child's statement will be entered into evidence." Across the aisle, Diane's attorney tried to object, but even his voice faltered. Klauser lowered his head. He wasn't thinking about court or legal rights anymore. He was thinking about the night he found her in the snow, the moment she looked at him with eyes full of fear, and how far she'd come since then. For the first time in years, he whispered a thank you to the heavens. Not for victory, but for mercy. Outside the courthouse, people who'd watched the trial on local news started leaving comments and messages online, thousands of them. "We saw Romaine's story. We won't forget her. Every child deserves someone who stops." But inside, the man who had stopped once on a freezing road could only think of one thing: a little girl who had finally spoken, and the world that had finally listened. 3 weeks later, the courtroom on St. Antoine Street was filled beyond capacity. The benches overflowed with journalists, foster care advocates, social workers, and ordinary citizens who had followed every twist of the case. Cameras waited quietly outside, their red lights blinking through the frosted courthouse windows. Inside, the air carried the weight of anticipation. At the front of the courtroom, Klauser sat beside Patricia Voss. For a man used to commanding boardrooms and negotiating billion-dollar deals, his hands shook slightly as he adjusted his tie. Confidence had never been a problem for him, but this wasn't business. This was his life, and hers. Across the aisle, Diane sat stiff and unmoving. Her usual sharpness had faded. Today, she wore a pale gray suit and no jewelry. Her lawyer leaned close, whispering in urgent tones, but she didn't answer. She only stared ahead, jaw tight, eyes flat. The bailiff called for order. All rose as Judge Carmen Valdez entered. She carried no visible expression, her robe swaying softly as she took her seat. She adjusted her glasses, reviewed her notes, and looked out across the courtroom. This court has spent weeks reviewing testimony, reports, and evidence, she began. The welfare of a child has always been, and remains, our highest priority. Every whisper stopped. Judge Valdez continued, her tone calm but firm. We have heard how Romaine Gunter was placed under the care of Diane Latham, a licensed foster parent. We have reviewed the home reports, financial audits, and testimonies from multiple witnesses. What emerged is deeply troubling. She turned a page. The evidence shows a repeated pattern of neglect, emotional cruelty, and manipulation of official records. Miss Latham fabricated behavioral reports, labeling normal childhood actions as severe disorders. This was done to justify additional funding and avoid accountability. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Diane's lawyer started to rise, but one look from the judge silenced him. The judge went on. Testimonies from store clerks confirmed extravagant personal purchases made with state funds intended for foster care. Medical professionals testified to chronic malnutrition. A forensic accountant traced money routed from support accounts into private spending. Patricia glanced at Clouser. His eyes didn't move from the judge. Further, Judge Valdez said, this court reviewed testimony from another case, Cameron, age 7, placed in Miss Latham's care in Indiana 2 years earlier. That child's statements, supported by drawings and documented medical neglect, mirror the same behavior pattern. The similarity cannot be ignored. Diane's face went pale. Then slowly, color returned, not warmth, but anger. Her fingers clenched the edge of the table. Her lawyer whispered something, trying to steady her, but her eyes remained locked on the bench. Judge Valdez's tone softened, but the words carried more force. No child should have to feel disposable. No child should be treated as a burden for existing. She paused, scanning the courtroom. Therefore, on the grounds of child endangerment, fraud, and reckless endangerment, this court rules that Diane Latham's foster care license is permanently revoked. She is barred from any future employment or volunteer work involving children. Criminal charges will be pursued under the recommendation of the state. A collective exhale moved through the room, part shock, part relief. Diane's shoulders stiffened. Her face went from white to deep red as she half rose, her lawyer grabbing her wrist and whispering, "Sit down. Don't make it worse." Judge Valdez closed the file, set her pen down, and looked toward Clouser. Now to the matter of guardianship. Clouser's breath caught. The room seemed to narrow to the sound of his own heartbeat. "Mr. Clouser," the judge said, "you have been subject to extensive background checks, psychological evaluations, and home studies. You have shown consistent dedication to Romaine's well-being. When others drove past that night, you stopped. You provided safety, consistency, and care. You made yourself present." She adjusted her glasses again. "You have learned about her needs, not just medical or emotional, but cultural. Testimony from Ms. Denise Rogers, her hairstylist, confirmed your effort to ensure Romaine's comfort and identity were honored. That, sir, speaks volumes." Clouser blinked rapidly. He tried to hold himself together, but emotion cracked through his composure. Patricia reached over, squeezing his hand. Judge Valdez's voice steadied. "For those reasons, This court grants full and permanent custody of Romain Gunter to Mr. David Klauser, effective immediately. The gavel struck once. The room erupted. Some clapped softly, others covered their mouths, overcome. Reporters whispered into microphones. A few social workers cried openly. Klauser froze for a moment, the words hanging in the air like a sunrise that didn't feel real yet. Then, slowly, he exhaled. His shoulders dropped. His eyes closed. When he looked up, across the crowded courtroom, Romain was there, brought in quietly with a guardian to witness the verdict. She was standing in the back, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Their eyes met. She smiled, a small glowing smile that spread like dawn. Klauser's vision blurred. He mouthed the words, "We did it." Romain nodded, her little hand rising in a shy wave. The judge watched quietly from the bench. Even she had to remove her glasses and dab her eyes. Diane slumped in her chair, defeated, silent. Her lawyer gathered papers wordlessly. The cameras outside began to buzz with breaking headlines. Billionaire wins custody of abandoned foster child. But inside, it wasn't about money or influence. It was about a man who stopped when others didn't, and a child who finally had a place to belong. When court adjourned, Klauser stood and turned toward the doorway. Romain was waiting, nervous but smiling. He knelt to her level. "Hi, sweetheart," he whispered. "Hi, Papa," she said, the word now free, now real. He opened his arms, and she ran into them. Flashbulbs went off, but neither of them noticed. For everyone else, it was the end of a story. For them, it was the beginning of a home. The Detroit skyline glittered like a mosaic of second chances. From the 72nd floor of the Renaissance Center, the city stretched endlessly, glass towers, river lights, and the hum of a city that had rebuilt itself from fire and frost more than once. Romain stood by the window, her forehead pressed to the glass, leaving a small foggy circle where she breathed. She was 5 now, 3 inches taller, cheeks full again, her hair a crown of carefully braided loops threaded with soft gold beads. The light caught them as she moved, and she giggled when they clicked together. Klauser stood a few steps back, watching her reflection. "You can see almost everything from up here," he said. "Even our house?" she asked without turning around. He smiled. "If you squint hard enough, maybe." Their home in Indian Village had been restored, white columns, blue shutters, laughter in the hallways where silence once lived. It wasn't just a mansion anymore. It was theirs. Every wall told a story now, crayon drawings, school photos, and the smell of Sunday pancakes that never seemed to leave the kitchen. Downstairs, Denise Rogers, Romain's hairstylist and unofficial auntie, had been teaching Klauser the art of hair care. "You can't rush it," she had warned him. "You comb from the ends, not the roots. Be gentle, hair holds memories." He took it seriously. Saturday mornings were their ritual, detangling, moisturizing, chatting about her week. He never missed it. Now, as Romain spun around, her braids fanning out like ribbons, she ran into his legs and looked up. "Papa." It had been 6 months since she'd started calling him that. The first time, it had slipped out at breakfast, followed by a quick shy glance to see if he'd mind. He hadn't. He'd smiled so wide she'd laughed just seeing it. "Yes, Romain," he said now. "Why did you stop that night? You could have just kept driving." The question hung between them. She asked it softly, not out of doubt, but curiosity, the kind that came from feeling safe enough to wonder aloud. He crouched to meet her eyes. "Because you mattered, Romain," he said gently. "You've always mattered. Even before I knew your name." She thought for a moment, her small hand resting against his chest. "Did I save you too?" He blinked, surprised by how easily her words reached the truth. "Yes," he said finally. "You did." Outside, the winter sun broke through a low cloud. Detroit's skyline glowed faintly gold, like the city itself was listening. Months after the verdict, something remarkable had begun. It started quietly, with one new bill passed through City Council, Romaine's Law. It required multiple unannounced home visits for all foster placements in Detroit. Every household would now undergo expanded background checks, not just at the start but throughout the year. A new anonymous hotline allowed teachers, neighbors, and even children to report concerns directly, without fear of retaliation. The change rippled fast. The number of foster applications rose by 40% in 6 months. People wanted to do better, to be better. The story of one girl abandoned in the snow, and one man who stopped, had reignited something deep in the city's conscience. In Dearborn, a retired couple who had lost their only child to illness applied to foster 2 siblings from a group home. In Ann Arbor, a single woman who'd always said she was too busy opened her door to a 7-year-old boy with speech delays. In Royal Oak, a young couple, unable to have children, adopted a toddler named Nyla who had been waiting almost 3 years. Every few weeks, Klauser's office mailbox overflowed with handwritten notes from people he'd never met. Some were short, "You reminded me to stop." Others told full stories of new beginnings. Teachers became more observant. Neighbors grew more attentive. Even the language around foster care began to shift, from pity to purpose. Detroit, a city once scarred by neglect and survivalism, was slowly earning a new reputation, one built on compassion. At home, Klauser and Romaine built a rhythm that felt natural. Mornings started with her racing down the staircase, sliding in socks across the polished wood floors. Evenings ended with bedtime stories. Her favorite was the snowy day. She loved pointing at the boy in the red coat and saying, "He looks like me." Sometimes she asked about Diane. Klauser always answered honestly, never cruelly. "She made choices that hurt people," he would say. "But that's not your fault." Romaine accepted that. Kids have a way of knowing when truth is safe. On her 5th birthday, they hosted a small party in the backyard. The neighbors came, along with Patricia Voss and Denise. There were balloons, too many cupcakes, and a piñata that Romaine refused to hit because it looks too happy. Klauser watched her dance with other kids, spinning in her yellow dress, carefree. There were no cameras that day, no reporters. Just the sound of children laughing under string lights. Later that night, after everyone left, they sat by the fireplace. Romaine leaned against his arm, holding a mug of hot chocolate. "Do you ever get tired of reading to me?" she asked sleepily. "Never. Even when I fall asleep in the middle?" He chuckled. "Especially then." They read a few pages before her head tipped against his shoulder. Her breathing slowed. He closed the book quietly, set it aside, and watched the flames shift and flicker. It struck him how much could change in 1 year. 12 months ago, she was a frightened child in a hospital bed, afraid to speak above a whisper. Now she was confident, opinionated, and endlessly curious. She had healed, but so had he. He had learned that leadership didn't always come from running companies. Sometimes it came from kneeling down, tying a shoelace, or listening to a child's story about her day. Romaine stirred, mumbling something half-dreamed. "What was that?" he whispered. "Best family ever," she murmured, eyes still closed. He smiled, the kind that reached deeper than joy, something closer to peace. Through the window, the city lights shimmered across the river. Somewhere out there, more children were sleeping safely tonight because people had decided to care. Detroit hadn't been redeemed by a billionaire's charity or a single law. It had been changed by awareness, by the collective act of stopping, noticing, helping. Klauser kissed the top of Romaine's head, whispered goodnight, and let the fire fade. Outside, snow began to fall softly. This time, it didn't feel cold. A year after the verdict, Detroit had changed, but so had Klauser and Romaine. Their story wasn't about wealth, tragedy, or headlines anymore. It had become a lesson, a quiet, living reminder that one act of courage can rewrite countless lives. Klauser often said that what happened between them could be summed up in 7 truths. They weren't written anywhere, but everyone who met them could feel them. The first truth: one person can make a difference. It started with one decision: to stop the car. It didn't fix the world, but it changed one life. Solving one problem still matters. That night, Clouser proved that help doesn't need a plan, just presence. The second truth: wealth without compassion is worthless. He'd spent years building companies and collecting awards. Yet none of it filled the silence of an empty house. He found purpose not in his money, but in what he gave up for someone smaller and more fragile than himself. True wealth, he realized, was the sound of laughter echoing through his home. The third truth: children know who truly sees them. Romain bonded with Clouser not because he rescued her, but because he saw her. He looked past her fear and saw a child worth loving. Every smile she gave him was built on trust, something no gift, no money, no law could buy. The fourth truth: trauma can be healed. It didn't happen overnight. There were nightmares, bad days, and quiet tears. But with time, structure, and love that never wavered, Romain began to bloom. Consistent care rebuilt what neglect had broken. The more she felt safe, the more she became herself again, bold, funny, and endlessly curious. The fifth truth: family isn't just biology. It's built through choice and commitment. Clouser and Romain didn't share blood, but they shared something stronger: a decision to belong to each other. Every bedtime story, every morning hug, every papa whispered through a sleepy grin was proof that family is chosen every single day. The sixth truth: privilege comes with responsibility. Clouser knew his status gave him power, access, attention, influence. But he chose to use it to lift others, not himself. He funded child welfare training, sponsored new foster parent workshops, and made sure Romain's law was more than just policy, it became protection. He didn't want applause, he wanted accountability. And the final truth: stopping is a revolutionary act. In a world where most people say, "Not my problem," stopping is radical. Slowing down long enough to see another human being can change everything. That night on Gresham Avenue, when most cars kept going, one man hit the brakes, and everything shifted. Today, Romain's life looks beautifully ordinary, which is exactly how it should be. She's thriving in kindergarten, loves spelling, art, and play therapy. Her teacher says she's the first to help new students find their seat. She's learning piano and practices every morning before school, determined to play like the lady on TV. Weekends are for playdates with friends, movie nights, and sleepovers. She's learning how to ride her pink bicycle without training wheels, and when she falls, she laughs instead of cries. That's what healing looks like: small moments of courage, repeated daily. For Clouser, the change runs deep. He now leaves work at 5 o'clock sharp, no exceptions. He reads parenting books, attends therapy himself, and mentors other adoptive parents. His business still thrives, but his heart belongs somewhere else entirely, to a child who taught him what love really costs and what it's truly worth. Every February 14th, they mark their anniversary, not a Valentine's Day, but the night they found each other. They don't throw parties or make speeches. Instead, they stay home. They light the fireplace, drink hot chocolate with too many marshmallows, and read The Snowy Day, the same story that once made Romain believe in warmth again. The Indian village house has become a symbol in the community, a place people point to and say, "That's where it happened." But to Clouser and Romain, it's just home. A place where the lights stay on, the fridge is full, and love doesn't have to be earned. Their story spread far beyond Detroit, not as a fairy tale, but as proof. Real lives, real pain, real hope. It reminded people everywhere that goodness isn't out of reach. Clouser often ends his public talks with one simple message: we can't save everyone, but we can save someone. Those words have echoed through schools, churches, and boardrooms. They've inspired fundraisers, mentorship programs, and foster parent campaigns. In just a year, more than 2,000 children across Michigan have been placed in safe, loving homes because someone heard their story and chose to stop. Romaine doesn't fully understand her legacy yet. To her, life is simple: breakfast with Papa, walks to school, piano lessons, bedtime hugs. But someday when she's older, she'll know the impact she made. Detroit has changed. The system that once failed her now listens more, checks more, and cares more. Foster homes are inspected thoroughly. Social workers receive better support. Teachers have direct lines to report concerns. The city's reputation, once marked by neglect, is now tied to compassion. Still, Clouser keeps things grounded. This isn't a miracle, he tells journalists. It's a choice. Every day. On quiet nights, after Romaine falls asleep, he sometimes sits in the same armchair where he once waited for adoption papers to be signed. He looks at the framed drawing she made, two stick figures holding hands under falling snow. At the bottom, in bright purple crayon, she wrote, "Me and Papa, we don't walk past people." That, more than any law or award, is his legacy. Because at its heart, their story isn't about rescue, it's about recognition. About what happens when one person refuses to look away. Detroit remembers. So does every viewer who heard their story and felt that pull in their chest, the reminder that goodness is still possible. If it can happen there, in a snowstorm on Gresham Avenue, it can happen anywhere. All it takes is someone willing to stop. So now, as you watch this, ask yourself, where might your moment to stop be? Who could you help, if you simply looked closer? Share your thoughts in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe to keep this mission alive. Because every story we share is a spark, and your support helps it reach someone who needs to believe that kindness still changes everything. Tomorrow, another story waits. But tonight, let this one remind you, the world doesn't change all at once. It changes one decision, one act, one person at a time. Thank you for being part of this journey. If this story touched you, don't just scroll away. Take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Your voice reminds us that compassion still connects us, no matter how far apart we are. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this. Because tomorrow, we're bringing you another powerful reminder of how kindness can rewrite someone's life. Every time you watch, share, or comment, you help keep these stories alive. You help shine a light on the good still happening in the world. And that light reaches farther than you think. Before you go, ask yourself one simple question. In your own community, at your own pace, who could you stop for? Maybe it's a neighbor who's struggling, a child who needs encouragement, or someone who's lost hope. One small act can make all the difference. Thank you for standing with us, for believing in stories that matter, and for proving, over and over again, that kindness is never wasted. We'll see you tomorrow right here, for another story that reminds us what's possible when we choose to care.